Where were you when it happened? What were you doing in life? For most of us, this memorable period of our life, where life had changed forever for us. We walked around less innocent that day, didn't we? Yet closer to each other. We understood that security is just a state of mind. It's not a reality. Especially in a society that prides itself on being so open. Families changed. We said things like, "I love you," to our children. Who'd figure? I remember a phone call from my father afterwards saying, "You know, I'm glad you turned down that job at the Pentagon a month ago." Now, I've gone to combat many times, and my father never said anything like that before. But for each of us, it was a time of reckoning, a time to realize how short life was and what our real priorities are. We called each other. We openly cried. Churches were packed. People came into churches that hadn't been in churches in a long time. They respected each other. It was the first time I've ever driven on I-95 and somebody cut me off and somebody didn't flip them off. I remember a friend of mine who lived in New York City, and there used to be people of Middle East descent that ran some of the grocery stores and delis. You could go in there and say, "I want that roast beef sandwich, double the meat for $2, and they didn't say anything. They were so frightened at the time that we were mad at everybody who was any kind of Middle Eastern descent. I remember a time when a fire truck drove out of the firehouse and we're all frightened. Oh, please, don't let it be another bombing. We still get scared to this day when all of a sudden some major catastrophe happens somewhere with a natural gas leak or something like that, and we all think, was it another terrorist bombing? I remember going down to Ground Zero. Actually, we went up to the Pentagon 2 weeks after the accident, after the September 11th, to visit some friends up there that we hadn't seen in a while. Again, we were going back to. And it was the first time, and I've been to the Pentagon many times in my life, it was the first time that I've ever seen a U.S. government building guarded by United States Marines with 50 cal machine guns and full combat gear on. Guarding against our own people, in our own country. And then I got on the PATH train to go in to see Ground Zero and to pray there. And I remember the smell of burning flesh, of burning steel, of burning furniture that permeated all the way in the PATH station in New Jersey. And the PATH train couldn't go into New York straight. It had to go up to Charles Street because the PATH station was under that rumble, that Ground Zero. You could smell it throughout New York City. If you were at the Empire State Building, which is 50 blocks north, you could smell the smell. Everywhere, Central Park was inundated with the smell of people that had died. And then when we went to Shanksville in Pennsylvania, it's an old coal field. It took them weeks to put that fire out because there was still coal in the ground. When that plane had hit, it set fire to the coal. It was spooky going there a month or two later. You think, it's done. But there's still smoke coming out of the ground to remind us all of where we've been, of where we are. We watched with pride as our president got up on top of a pile of ruins. And I don't care who your political affiliation was, you were cheering him on. I felt like it was almost like FDR, where people hated him and people loved him, but everybody was cheering him on when he went before Congress and said, this is a day that will last in infamy. We were all cheering on. We were cheering on the mayor of New York. Half of us didn't even know Giuliani until all of a sudden this happened, and we're cheering him on. It was scary. A half a year later, we went to see the tree lighting ceremony, or a few months later, to see a tree light ceremony in New York City. Mary and I and the kids, and there's Giuliani, the mayor of New York, and he has armed guards with machine guns. The mayor of New York City has to be escorted with machine guns. Then life went along. The images somehow or another got taken off TV. You remember that? We weren't allowed to see airplanes hitting buildings anymore. We weren't allowed to see the images of military guys stand there like this on the side of the Pentagon trying to figure out what's going on. September 10th started kicking back in, didn't it? This morning it reminded me, especially as I was watching the news out of Jacksonville, and they're talking about all the September 11th memorials going, and then a commercial came along. Have you been injured in a car accident? Call 188 blah, 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 blah. Do you see how Satan has tempted us to fall back into our old ways? To realize that September 11th, he does not want us to look at each other and say, I love you, or you're important to me, or I forgive you. He wants us to go back into squeaky boots, to worry about, you owe me. He wants us to slip back in September 10th. We cannot allow that to happen to our lives. September 11th told us that we cared about each other irregardless of who we were. We took care of strangers. But we have all gotten tempted, all of us have gotten tempted to worry too much about September 10th. And we've got slipped back in that way. So this Sunday, I beg you, as your spiritual director, look back at September 11th. And what are you missing from that day that was important to you? Parents, when's the last time you told your children you really love them? What about that distant relative that you made fun of last Thanksgiving because their apricot pie got burnt or whatever case, or they made fun of your turkey dinner? What if today is your last day? What if today is your September 11th? How are you going to live your life if God is judging you on how you live today? Are you going to forgive 70 times 7? We really need to go back to September 11th and live that day. To forgive each other irregardless of how we come. To look at somebody on the street and not judge them as the way they look, but who they are in God's eyes. If we've forgotten about family and friends, if we've allowed September 10th to get back in our hearts, then I am telling you here today, get back to September 11th. 2 years ago, we had 3 young girls who were committed to commit suicide in front of an Acela train right in our town at Prospect Park. One of the girls backed out. It was supposed to be 9 altogether. Life was so bad for them that they were going to commit suicide in front of a speeding Acela train at 110 miles an hour. The one girl that backed out of the 3 was all because she got a phone call from her brother. Not a text, not an email, a phone call. And he said, I love you, and I heard what you're going to do, and don't do it. I love you. That's September 11th. We need to get back to September 11th. Our priority should be our friends, our family. Our lives are too short to worry about grief and burdens of 2, 3, 4 years ago. If you haven't talked to your family or friends because of something they did wrong, get over it. Get over it and forgive them. You are not the judge. God is the judge. Yours is to love and live and preach Jesus Christ. So I ask you today, live it as if every day is September 11th in your life. Understand that life is way too short. Don't let relationships go sour. Don't let them get distant. If there's somebody in your life that has vexed you or made you sad, forgive them. Get back on par with where God is. Because as we've seen in the images we'll see today, life is way too short to carry a stone in your heart of hatred or discontent toward another human being that Jesus Christ died for just as much as he died for you. Live today as if it is your very last day to live. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.